Hi, friends, and welcome back to Kev's Library. I am the aforementioned Kev, and we are going to be talking today about the mid-year freakout tag and also a wrap-up of all the books I've read the first half of the year. So, let's get into it. Also, if this seems really rehearsed and or I seem slightly annoyed, it's because I already filmed this and then my mic died. Anyway, so I have all the questions on my handy-dandy iPad. So for the mid-year freakout, the first question is the best book I've read so far. The best book I think I've read so far this year definitely has to be Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez. It is a nonfiction book that looks at data bias and how there is an inherent gender bias in all of the data that is collected, and how that gender bias affects the planning, executing literally anything in our everyday lives. Like, for example, for the longest time, there was a higher fatality rate in women in car crashes versus men, despite men getting into more car crashes than women, because the test dummies were all centered around the male body. They just started introducing like female body test dummies for crash tests. And it's just stuff like that that you don't think about at all until somebody points it out, and then you think about it every single day. And that is how I feel about that book. Every day there is something that comes up where I think this is because of a data gap, isn't it? And I just think that that is like the testament of a really great book, especially a really great nonfiction, is one that you will keep thinking about over and over again, probably till the end of time. The next question is best sequel I've read this year. So I'm actually really awful about reading series, and I usually forget to read the sequels. But this year, I have two sequels that I am going to put as my best sequels I've read this year. They are from the same series, and that is Bloodmarked and Oathbound by Tracy Deonn. They are the second and third book of the Legendborn series, which follows Bree as she kind of infiltrates a secret society centered around Arthurian legend. And they are so good. Tracy Deonn puts something in them damn books because I love them so much. I think about them every day. Tracy, if you're watching, you're not, but please, the fourth book could be my favorite sequel of 2026 in the latter half, or 2027. I would even wait for 2028. I would just love to know when it's going to be my favorite sequel. Okay, so the next question is a new release you haven't read yet but want to. So the first one, I have every opportunity to read it right now because it is currently in my Kindle from the library. And that is Yesteryear, which, if you don't know, is about a trad wife influencer who, is selling the trad wife life where they're drinking raw milk. She's making all of her food from scratch. It's a hellscape, but somehow she thinks it makes it look good. She's not wearing shoes and she's in a chicken coop, and you're wondering where's the chicken shit. Anyway, one day, she gets transported back to the 1800s and she has to live the life that she's been selling online. And I have heard so much about this book. Everybody has been talking about it online. My friend in real life actually read it recently and raved about it. So I really want to read it. That is my goal for this week, mostly because it's already due at the library. But I'm going to try and read it this week. This is a Monday, so we'll see what happens. The second book I want to get to is for my physical TBR, and that is Nowhere Burning by Catriona Ward. It follows two siblings who run away from home, and they go to this weird commune for like runaway kids run by this like celebrity who's kind of disgraced, and he's a little weird. So the next question is most anticipated release for the second half of the year. So I chose Bad Words, which is publishing in October. I do have an advanced reader copy literally sitting in my Kindle, but I haven't gotten to it yet. But I've seen a lot of reviews for it that sound so promising. It's an enemies to lovers romance, and it centers an author and a book reviewer. And the book reviewer, she is known for being really harsh, but her opinion matters so much in the publishing world that if she gives you a bad review, like, you're done. Your pizza is cooked. And this guy wrote this book, and he was being lauded as like the next great American novelist. He was like getting six-figure book deals lined up, everything. But then she got his debut novel, gave it a bad review, and now his career is kind of going up in smoke, and he's trying to save it. And so he's publishing a second book, and he finds out that she got a review copy and she's going to leave a review. I'm really looking forward to it because I also just love a good romance to sink my teeth into. Okay, so the next question of the mid-year freakout tag is my biggest disappointment. And unfortunately, I have three. So the first book I'm going to talk about is Wretch by Eric LaRocca. I got an advanced reader copy for it, and I really, really wanted to like it. And I think that if I really think about it, I do like it. It's a very interesting plot. It follows Simeon as he grieves the loss of his husband, and he finds a support group that kind of gives him a weird way of grieving, which ultimately leads him to this like supernatural figure who can give people one last intimate moment with their lost loved one. And it's such an interesting plot, but here is the thing. It was marketed to me in the like little blurb and everything about it that it was going to be like a stomach churning horror. Like I was going to be horrified, terrified, freaked out. And I'll admit I have a stronger stomach than most, but at no point was I even mildly freaked out. Like it just kind of felt weird. Like it was a weird book, but in a good way. It was a weird, good book. But it wasn't a horror. Like I did not think it was a horror book. So I was so disappointed because I thought it was such a cool concept for a horror novel. And so that's why it's one of my biggest disappointments. I think if you go in not expecting horror, terrifying, anything like that, you're going to love it, or you're going to at least like it a little more than I probably did. But just the fact that I was going in expecting something and got something completely different did drag it down for me. The next book that is unfortunately on my disappointments. Once again, I really liked this book. I even gave it 4 stars. But Catabasis by R.F. Kuang, I think, was the victim of an overhyped PR train. So here's the thing. I like R.F. Kuang. I loved Babel. I cried through the last 5 chapters. I also loved Yellowface. Incredible book. I haven't read the Poppy War series. It is on my list. I don't think I've been in the right headspace to read the Poppy War series. But I read Catabasis. And once again, I gave it 4 stars. I had a good time. I enjoyed it. I liked the plot, etc., etc. However, I was just so disappointed because of how much hype I think surrounded it. It was partially like everyone was going crazy for the world building. And I found the world building to be kind of lacking, honestly. I am going through the 9 circles of hell with this character, and I've only gotten really 1 or 2 like in depth described to me. And everywhere else, it's kind of we're walking through the desert, whatever, moving on. And it was just kind of disappointing that we didn't get to actually be in the 9 circles of hell. And then I don't know if y'all saw it. I saw it. But I saw a lot on my timeline people reading the advanced reader copy of Catabasis and then kind of like assigning reading to do beforehand so that you like understood it and could like immerse yourself and just know what's going on in Catabasis. And it was things like Dante's Inferno, which makes sense. 9 circles of hell, Dante's Inferno, doy. But I read it without having read any of those. And I understood everything just fine. And I don't think you really need to do in-depth reading to understand what's going on in Catabasis. And once again, that's not a bad thing. And I'm glad that people were looking at Catabasis and it was inspiring them to read Dante's Inferno and other classics to help them understand the world that R.F. Kuang had created. But I just don't think it was necessary, nor did it need to be hyped like that as something that you needed to have like such an academic understanding of these novels to understand this novel. It kind of felt pretentious after I read it, and I was like, all right, what was the fucking point of that? But anyway, so the next and final book that I would say is one of my biggest disappointments is once again a book that I really liked. I did also give this one 4 stars, and that is Cleat by Meryl Wilsner. Now, nobody jump me until I finish my explanation. I gave it 4 stars because I really did like it. I liked the romance. I liked the characters. I liked the plot. I even didn't mind the fact that the miscommunication trope is the biggest plot point here. I didn't mind that. I loved all of it. Why I gave it 4 stars. The reason it's not 5 is because It did not live up to what was back here. So here's the thing. This was another victim of the blurb leading me astray. The blurb would have you believe that these characters are rivals to lovers and that they're going to have a lot of tension because this one is trying to take this one's position on the US women's national team for the World Cup. There was no tension. There was barely any rivalry. They kind of were into each other from the very beginning, and it was like, okay, that's fine. You can just say that. We didn't have to push this rivals to lovers narrative. And then this is just a personal qualm. I'm sorry. There wasn't enough soccer for me. And I'm saying that as someone who, while filming, is actively watching a World Cup game. There was not enough soccer. You got maybe 2 pages total where they were playing soccer, and a page and a half of that was the practicing. They were practicing soccer, not playing a game. And I understand. It's a sports romance. There's going to be more focus on the romance. But I wanted a little more focus on the sports. The World Cup wasn't even that big of a deal. They did talk about the World Cup and making the national team. However, the World Cup was literally a page. You got to the World Cup, the story ended before the first game even started. It ends with them walking out on the field. Sorry, spoiler alert, but so that's why it was one of my biggest disappointments, is that it wasn't rivals to lovers, there was no tension, it wasn't as described, and there wasn't enough soccer. But still, great book. 4 stars. Please do read it. It is an excellent sapphic romance. Just don't expect any soccer. So the next question is biggest surprise that you've read this year, and I would have to say that's How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kwong. So in this one, you follow Helen, who is a YA author, and her books have been optioned for a TV show. And so they bring in scriptwriters, and one of the screenwriters is Grant, a man she has not seen since high school when a literal, horrible, awful tragedy tied them together. The tragedy, you may ask, it's not a spoiler. They tell you in like the first 3 chapters, is that Grant is driving home one night after a party, and Helen's sister decides that she's gonna kill herself by throwing herself in front of his car. She's successful, if you're wondering. So, like, that's the tragedy. And then they're supposed to fall in love. Right. So me, someone who is obsessed with my sisters to the point that I was Zillowing houses across the street from them so we could live across the street from each other, was very not like, I went into this thinking that this was not gonna work. That this romance was doomed from the beginning, and I was actually reading like a tragic lit fic where romance is dead. No. The romance somehow freaking worked. I don't know what Yulin Kwong did to this, but the romance worked. I, by the end of it, was rooting for them to be together, to stay together, despite what happened. And I just think that that is crazy, first of all. Second of all, really great. It was a great love story because it made sense too. You you read their love story and them falling in love with each other and getting together, and you're like, okay, yes, I totally understand how they were able to move past this tragedy that tied them together. But anyway, How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kwong, my biggest surprise of the year. The next question is favorite new author. And as I mentioned earlier, I have been obsessed with the Legendborn series this year, so I will have to say Tracy Deonn is my new favorite author, just because, geez, those books are so good. That's genuinely all I have to say. I owe her my life, my personal life. She doesn't have to take it. She doesn't owe me anything. I owe her my life. That's just it. All right, so the next question is newest fictional crush. Here's the thing. I haven't gotten a crush on a book character since, like, I was in high school and I fell in love with Richard Campbell Gansey III. Still am in love, that is. But I haven't really, like, gotten book crushes since then. Mostly just because I don't feel like it. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. I just don't get them. But if I had to pick one, I would say Grant from How to End a Love Story, because excellent, excellent love interest. And also, my boyfriend's name is Grant. So it's like, right there. It's easy. The next question is newest favorite character. And I am once again going to talk about Legendborn because it is Bree Matthews. She is such a badass and she is so cool. And I love her. And she can do no wrong. She's the best. She can do a little wrong, but that's because it's narratively important for everyone to be not perfect. Anyway, so the next question is a book that made me cry. And if you had asked me last week when I filmed this, originally, I would have said none. I haven't cried at a book yet this year. And that's fair. I tend to not really cry too much at books. However, Hold Me Like a Grudge by Celine Ong, published today, June 30th. I'm filming on June 30th. It published today. It's already out. If you are watching this, check it out. Go to a bookstore. Support a local indie. Do what you will, but it should include going to get Hold Me Like a Grudge and reading it. So, Hold Me Like a Grudge follows Caleb and Asher, who are two pro wrestlers with GEW. And Asher is a face, which is basically just like he's well liked. And Caleb is a heel, which I have learned from the book means that he's supposed to be the most hated person in the entire wrestling universe. They fall in love. Surprise! But the book is so beautifully written, and it is such a great story of queer joy and community and finding love that loves you back and loving yourself. And there's so many things that I could say, but personally, I connected so much with both characters, different aspects of both characters, but I connected with them so much that whenever they were having a crash out, I too was having a similar crash out because it was making me think about my life. And then I was thinking about how my life is different from their life, and so on and so forth. And it was just such an emotional roller coaster for me that that is the book that I will say book that made me cry. Hold Me Like a Grudge by Celine Ong. First book to do it this year. Congratulations. The next question is a book that made me happy, and I will have to go with The Viscount Who Loved Me by Julia Quinn. So this is the second book in the Bridgerton series, and it follows Anthony and Kate's love story. Anthony is the Viscount of the Bridgerton family, and he is on the hunt for a wife, and he just has to marry Kate. It turns into a they have to be married in the book. They have to be married because they are caught in like a compromising position. But here's the thing. I went into the book having already watched the show, and season 2, which is Anthony and Kate season, is my absolute favorite season. It is so good. I would give my life for Jonathan Bailey and Simone Ashley. They are so amazing. I would also give my life to get them better screen time, better writers, and better wardrobe, hair, and makeup in the later seasons. But that's besides the point. The next question is the most beautiful book I've gotten this year, and I would have to give that award to my new copy of Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. It also has Anne of Avonlea in here, which I think is so fun. But look at it. It is so beautiful. And hold on, let me show you the back. The back. And like the green foil and the embossed title and details. Like, it is just such a beautiful edition of a book I have yet to read. I've always really wanted to read it because one of my favorite shows in high school, and honestly up till today because it holds such a special place in my heart, is Anne with an E, which is a retelling and, production of Anne of Green Gables. So, this one, most beautiful book I've gotten this year. And the final question of the mid-year freakout tag is books that I need to read by the end of the year. And for that, I have two for different reasons. The first one is East of Eden by John Steinbeck. I have been wanting to read this one for a little bit, but I'm definitely getting pushed more to read it by the Netflix movie that's coming out with Florence Pugh, because I love Florence Pugh. I'll watch anything she's in all the time, every day, 24 hours a day. So I really want to read this before the movie comes out so that I can watch the movie and be like, wow, this is just like the book. Or, wow, this is nothing like the book, but at least Florence Pugh's amazing. Either option is totally fine with me. The second book I want to read by the end of the year is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This is just because it keeps getting mentioned in pop culture that I've been consuming, and I'm like, should I read that? Because I've never read it, and I've also never seen any of the movies. So I genuinely don't know what's going on in this book. I might not even read the back blurb and just go in blind because that sounds kind of fun. But I'm looking forward to reading it this year. Okay, so I figured for the rest of the video, I would just go through all of the 46 books I've read so far this year and kind of give you my thoughts on them. They're sorted into the star ratings and, just chat a little bit about each and every one of them. My current reading goal is 100 for this year. I have never hit 100. Last year, I was really close with 92. So I'm hoping that maybe this year I will do 100. But if I don't, not the end of the world. Life moves on. I've currently read 46 books this year, and let's go through them. Based on their star rating, they are organized. So I've been lucky enough this year to not have read any 1-star reads, but I have read some 2 stars. So let's get into it. The first book I'm going to be talking about is The Night It Ended by Garner. I gave this one 2 stars. It follows a criminal psychiatrist who specializes in female criminal psyche, and she goes to a very remote, very like hidden away in the woods boarding school for troubled girls, and one of the girls has died, and the private investigator looking into her death wants to see what she can get out of like interviews from the other students. This one pissed me off, but also I never cared. Like, that's the thing. I was 50% of the way through the book. Somebody asked me if I liked it, and I said, I don't know. I don't really care about it. And the only reason I finished it is because I'm nosy and wanted to know what the ending was. But here's the thing, I could have just looked it up. So I really didn't need to finish it. But this is just the stereotypical crazy lady solving a murder. Nobody believes her because she's crazy kind of thriller. And I fear that I'm a little over that. It was like such a big thing in like the early 2020s, in the 2010s, and it's like, okay, we get it. She's crazy. Nobody trusts her. And fun fact, I pulled this book to show you out of the bag of books that I'm unhauling. So I'm going to put it back in the bag now. Thank you. The next book I gave 2 stars is The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. That is the first book in the Bridgerton series, and it follows Daphne and Simon's love story. Basically, Daphne wants to seem desirable to the other men of the town. The Duke, Simon, doesn't want to be desired by the mothers who want him for their daughters of the town. So they come up with a fake courting thing so that they can both get what they want. This book was written so that I could read the second one. That's genuinely my thoughts on it. And there are certain scenes in the book that I don't think needed to be in there. And like, I understand why they were included, why they were written, but I think that the point that they were trying to get across could have been done in a way that's not that. And if you know and if you've seen the show, it's the exact same thing as what I'm talking about in the book. And I just don't think that it's really needed. Finally, the last book I gave a 2-star rating. It was a 2.5-star rating, and that was to Wretch. As I mentioned earlier, it was just such a disappointment based on what I was expecting that I just didn't see how to rate it any higher than 2.5 stars. So now we're moving on to the 3-star reads. So this one I gave 3.5 stars, and that is Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone by Benjamin Stevenson. I think that the plot and the mystery was really great, really entertaining. And most of the time I liked the writing style. It's very like friendly and familiar, like you're FaceTiming with a friend. But every once in a while he would get into talking about murder mysteries and the rules of murder mysteries to the point that it felt like I was being mansplained murder mysteries. And as someone who has read like a billion of them, I didn't really need that. But I mean, if it's baby's first murder mystery and you don't know the rules and you don't know the general idea of like what stereotypically happens in a murder mystery, the genre cliches kind of thing, then this is a great book to read because it does explain everything in a very fun, accessible way. I just already knew what he was talking about, so I got bored of it. The next book I gave 3.5 stars is The Anniversary by Alex Finlay. In this one, you follow 2 characters as they kind of experience this tragedy on May 1st. And I think like the first one was like 1990. And then it goes over the course of 20 years where you only see these characters on May 1st of that year. It was a really interesting plot and I really enjoyed it. It is a murder mystery because there is some a killer going around called the Mayday Killer, and it was very interesting. I liked the plot. The issue was that because you only saw the characters on one day every single year, it very much turned into a lot of telling and not showing about what happened to them in the like throughout the year. Where it would be this character is doing something, and this reminds them of the fact that they did this, and this with this person at this time in this place, and blah 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 blah. And here's what they thought about it. Here's what they talked about. But actually, the character is still on May 1st, so this totally counts. And it just felt very clunky, and I didn't really like it. But the plot was great. The execution was just what was lacking. The next book I gave 3.5 stars is The Body Scout by Lincoln Michel. In this one, you follow a robot. He's kind of like a human, but he's a cyborg because he has like replaced parts of his body with robot parts. And his name is Kobo. He is a scout for this like major league baseball team, but it's not baseball like you think it is. It's like corporations have bought it out, that kind of thing. But his brother plays for one of the teams. His name is JJ Zunes, and he gets killed at home plate. Something happens and he keels over and dies. And Kobo is hired by the team's owner to figure out what happened to JJ. Overall, I do think that this was like a fun sci-fi book. It was also kind of like a murder mystery, but the reason it's 3.5 stars is that the main character Kobo had zero sense of urgency. He had like 7 days to figure out who killed JJ, and he wasted like one of them just fucking around and sleeping in his apartment and doing dumbass shit. And I was getting kind of irritated with it. But overall, I mean, it was fun. It was a book. I read it. And finally, the last book I gave a 3-star rating to is Burn the Kingdom Down by Addie Thorley, and that one was 3.75 stars. Burn the Kingdom Down follows Indira, who's the second-born princess to the royal family, and her older sister Rowena has been married off to a neighboring kingdom's prince for a like royal treaty marriage kind of thing. But then Rowena dies in a very mysterious manner, and so to keep the treaty alive and to investigate Rowena's death, Indira then marries the prince and goes in Rowena's place. It's, I think, a really great fantasy read. I liked the world building. I enjoyed the magic system. I thought it was pretty cool. And I understood like the politics between the two kingdoms. So I kind of understood the stakes. But my qualm with it is that sometimes the stakes did not feel high at all. Like there has been like Indira believes that her sister has been murdered, but she's also just kind of like going around having a good time, hanging out in the kingdom. And I just get a little, it was a little weird, like the pacing and the stakes. And then on top of that, the ending was a little like here damn, like it wasn't actually an ending that was built up to. It was kind of just like this is the ending, that here's the ending, enjoy. Overall, though, I did still enjoy it, and I liked the romance between Indira and the prince. I think his name is Alaric. I did enjoy their romance, and I thought it was really well done. So now we're moving on to our 4-star reads. So the first one I'm going to be talking about is Lies Between Us by Jessica Goodman. This one follows the Gold sisters, who are best friends with the Silver boys. Yes, I know. And one of their classmates dies at the beginning of the summer, and you basically follow them through, I think it's about a month or so, through the investigation as secrets come out between them, between the sisters, between the brothers, between the sisters and their friendship with the brothers. So the reason it's only 4 stars for me is because it was supposedly like a murder mystery, but only one of the siblings really did any investigating and they weren't that good at it. And the ending kind of is just given to you, like the ending of the mystery and the solution is kind of just given to you as opposed to any actual like investigating happening. I think that I would classify this more in my head as more of a like coming of age story with a mystery subplot, because the mystery subplot really means nothing. The next book I gave 4 stars to is Cleat by Meryl Wilsner, but since I already talked about it earlier, I won't go too in depth. The next book I gave 4 stars to was In Case I Go Missing by R.N. Swann, and this one follows these 2 best friends, and their best friend, who's kind of like their town's Nancy Drew, has gone missing. And when they're looking for her, they find this binder that, as a joke, they gave her. That was an In Case I Go Missing binder. And it was supposed to be filled with like all this information you need to know in case she goes missing, like her bank account, how to log into her emails, possible suspects, stuff like that. But once they start flipping through the pages, they realize that she was investigating something, and this investigation is most likely what led to her disappearance. This one I gave 4 stars because it is a YA murder mystery, which is not saying that they can't be done well, but I am starting to think that I might be getting a little too old for YA murder mystery because everything kind of just falls into their laps because they're teenagers and they're not seasoned detectives. And so I kind of want them to like be a little more Nancy Drew with it, but I'm understanding that like not everybody can be Nancy Drew. So I still really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for what it was, and I had a good time. I think that the twist was good. There was a surprise twist that even got me. So I have to give it its tens there. The next book I gave 4 stars to was We Dance Upon Demons by Vaishnavi Patel. In We Dance Upon Demons, you follow a burnt out healthcare worker who works in an abortion clinic as she is trying to figure out how to keep going with her job because she's getting increasingly burnt out and not wanting to go. But then one day she accidentally gains the powers of this spirit, this demon. I don't know if he's like a demon, but he's like a deity. And then she is being hunted and, sought out by a demon who wants that power for themselves. And on top of that, she does have to deal with all of the bullshit that abortion clinics have to deal with protesters and threats and all of that stuff. So I really did enjoy this one. I thought the main character was very relatable, and I think that it is a timeless tale, especially with what's going on with reproductive rights in America now, about abortion clinics, and I'm sure the fatigue that a lot of those healthcare workers are experiencing. My only issue with it is that the pacing was very clunky. You would go from fight, breakneck speed, you are learning so much about the plot, etc., to slow as molasses, nothing is happening, and you're learning nothing, and this kind of feels like a waste of your time, but you're not going to skip this page, to fast pace. So, like, getting whiplash from the pacing was what made me drop it to 4 stars, just because I feel like there could have been a middle ground. The next book I gave 4 stars to was Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas. And this one you follow Yadriel, who is a member of this brew community. I say brew because that's how I pronounced the gender neutral term for the magic casters here. In the book, it's spelled Brujx. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, so I just shortened it to brew because, fun fact, in Tagalog, which is the Filipino language, a brew or a bruja is a witch, and my dad used to call me brew. Anyway, don't read into that. I was a little witchy as a kid. Adriel is a trans boy, and his family is very traditional, and he is desperate to become part of the ranks of the male brews. And he goes through their like rite of passage, and he gets blessed as a brew. But that same night, his cousin goes missing, and so they think he's been murdered. So Yadriel tries to bring his spirit back so they can talk to him and find out what happened. But on accident, Yadriel accidentally brings back one of his classmates, Julian, who doesn't know where he is, doesn't know what's happened, but he is a ghost. And this just kind of follows their story. They do fall in love. But that's also them trying to figure out what's going on with Julian, what happened to their cousin, everything like that. I thought the magic system in this was so cool. I really enjoyed seeing the community of the brews and just like kind of learning about it. But the reason it is 4 stars is because it was kind of a little all over the place in terms of like stakes and the vibes. Plus, the dialogue sometimes felt a little clunky, but I also maybe just don't know how teenagers talk anymore. Continuing on, the next book I gave 4 stars is You Did Nothing Wrong by C.G. Drew. You Did Nothing Wrong follows Elodie and her son Jonah as they kind of navigate living in this new place. She's just moved to America to be with her new husband, and he is renovating his childhood home so that they can live in it. But everything is a little creepy, everything's a little freaky. The house is starting to haunt her, and her son Jonah has started saying really weird things like the renovations are hurting the house and the house doesn't like the renovations. And it's kind of this very creepy, atmospheric novel that has you kind of like, I personally was like, this is freaky. I'm looking behind me at all times. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And I thought it was a very great book. It was twisty, it was turny. I do think that some of the twists were just as horrifying as you could imagine. The only reason I gave it 4 stars is, once again, I thought that the pacing was a little chunky, a little weird. But then on top of that, I kind of wished that there were other characters. Like, I wasn't just always with only Elodie and Jonah and her husband. I wanted her to interact a little bit. She did interact outside of it, outside of, her family unit, just a little bit. And every time she did, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I want to be here more. I want to be in her head more when they're interacting outside of the family unit, because like Elodie's train of thought was just so interesting to me. I wanted to be there all the time around other people, not just like her in her home having a meltdown. The next book I gave 4 stars to is Dollface by Lindy Allen. This one follows a new to town horror writer mom as she basically gets voluntold to join the PTA. And then the members of the PTA start getting maimed by a creepy serial killer in a mask. This one, so fun. It is such a great little freaky slasher. The main character is competent. She understands what's going on. She doesn't veer into crazy lady nobody believes. And to the point that she even acknowledges, she's like, if I go too far, people are going to think I'm a crazy lady. And I thought it was really good. There are multiple twists. I saw one of them coming, which is why I was like, okay, 4 stars. But the other one was really good. So I didn't see that coming, and I really enjoyed that. But overall, I think it was a great read. Super fun, super creepy. Continuing on the super fun, super creepy, the next book I gave 4 stars to is When I Kill You by B.A. Paris. And this one, you follow this woman as she is kind of getting stalked. She's not kind of getting stalked. She is getting stalked, but she thinks that it has something to do with this event in her past. And so she's trying to figure it out. And it's also like a dual storyline where you don't know what she did in the past, but you're with her as she's doing it. So it's both those timelines kind of spliced together. And it was super interesting premise. The twist was really good. I liked it. Highly recommend. I think it is super creepy. Like, you get point of views from the stalker, and those made like literal shivers go down my spine. It was so creepy. And finally, in the last book I gave a 4.0 stars to is Calabasas by R.F. Kuang, but since I've already talked about it, we're just going to scooch right past. So this book I gave 4.25 stars to, and that is Beautiful Creatures by Kami Garcia and Margaret Stoll. This is the first book in the Beautiful Creatures series, and in it you follow Ethan Waite as he figures out that he has been dreaming of the new girl in his class, and the new girl, Lena Duquesne, happens to be a caster, which is like a witch. And she has until her 16th birthday until she is claimed by either the dark or the light side of their magic. And they fall in love, and it's kind of a forbidden romance, and it is what it is. I gave this one 4.25 stars because I had a great time. I had a ball of a time. It was exactly what I wanted out of a YA fantasy. And I'm really looking forward to reading the next 3 books and finishing the series. The reason I dropped it down 0.75 stars from a 5-star read is because it is from 2009, which means that sometimes they say something crazy about women, and you're like, oh, okay. Yup, that is the misogyny I remember from 2009. The next book I gave 4.25 stars is The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. In this one, you follow Emma, who 15 years ago, all of the girls in her summer camp cabin disappeared, and she was the last one to see them alive. And then, flash forward 15 years, the camp is opening again, and the lady who runs it asks her to be the art teacher. And she decides, okay, I'll go back. And she ends up staying in that same cabin, and she's trying to figure out what happened to those girls. I really enjoyed this Riley Sager book. The last one I read from him was The House Across the Lake, and that one put me off of Riley Sager for a solid 5 months, maybe 6, because if you remember the twist in that book, it is a pet peeve of mine for that kind of twist to be the twist. I can go more in depth if you've already read it, but I'm not going to do that now because if you haven't read it, I'm not going to spoil it. But this one was so good. It was very twisty, very atmospheric. I loved the summer camp setting, and I loved like Emma as a narrator and as an investigator, because I just feel like she was pretty competent as an investigator, and I enjoyed that. But I also read this on the beach, so I could have beach bias. Any book I read on the beach is going to be a great read to me because at least I'm on the freaking beach. The next book I gave 4.25 stars to is Persuasion by Jane Austen. Funnily enough, I have only ever read Persuasion by Jane Austen. This is the only Jane Austen book I've ever read. I'm hoping to get to her other ones this year or next year, just soon-ish, because I do have a copy of all of them. And I do like her writing. I think that she has such beautiful prose, and I enjoy her takes on society from, this era. I think that they're very well done. In this one, you follow Anne Elliot as she and her family are kind of living their lives in society, and she meets for a second time in her life this captain. And in the first time she met him, her and this captain, he was not a captain yet. He was super poor, and she was persuaded, out of marrying him. But now she sees him again, and he's a captain. He's someone that she could be allowed to marry. And she kind of has to grapple with, that kind of love. Does she still love him? Does he still love her? Is he ever going to forgive her? What are they going to do? Etc., etc. And I just really enjoyed it. I did listen to it on audiobook because I have found that I do like her writing more on audio, but she does have such beautiful writing. So shout out Janie. The next two books I gave 4.25 stars because they are in a series is Romancing Mr. Bridgerton and An Offer from a Gentleman. An Offer from a Gentleman is the third book in the Bridgerton series, whereas Romancing Mr. Bridgerton is the fourth. The third one follows Benedict and Sophie. The fourth one is Colin and Penelope. I really enjoyed both of these books. I think that they were such great takes on like a Regency romance. I think they were, different because the first two they did have the kind of forced marriage aspect of it because they were both compromised and they did have to get married to save their reputations. So these ones, it was nice that they were like completely different kind of storylines. I really loved Benedict and Sophie, and I loved the ending of theirs and how like badass Benedict's family was for Sophie. I also really loved Colin and Penelope's book. I think that the show did them a disservice because I loved them in the book. The show, it was an okay season. The next book I gave 4.25 stars is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. In this one, you follow Jane Eyre, who is an orphan as she grows up in this like boarding school, and then she becomes a governess, and then she ends up falling in love with the guardian of the child that she's the governess for, and kind of her adventures, that kind of thing. I really like this one. I enjoyed reading about Jane's life. I thought she was really funny and that it was just such a great story. And look, if you are a reader and you are also a hopeless romantic and you go on Pinterest ever, one of the main quotes you see all the time is that "reader, I married him" quote. I didn't know it was from Jane Eyre. So when it happened, it was like I was seeing a celebrity and I was like knocked on my fucking ass about it. I was like, oh my God, reader, I married him. That's from this. And it was just so good. I loved it. I did do a mix of audio and physical for this one just because I was in the middle of a puzzle and I wanted to work on my puzzle. But the audiobook is really good. I do enjoy it. So the first book I gave 4.5 stars to is Man of My Dreams by Olivia Worley. This one follows a romance writer, and after her first book gets published, she meets this man and she thinks, wow, this is the man of my dreams. Except he is exactly like the love interest in the next book she's writing. So that's kind of weird. And then as she meets him, she also starts getting weird, cryptic, threatening messages from a stranger. It's crazy. I did really enjoy this one. I thought the twists were good. I thought the plot was good. I think that it was just a very entertaining murder mystery thriller. It was exactly what you want out of them without being too cliche. I mean, you still were able to guess a lot of the like twists, but it was still a good time. Like it was like good twists that you were okay with guessing. The next one I gave 4.5 stars. I was kind of in my murder mystery bag this first half of the year because the next one is Missing in Soho by Holly Stars. This is the second book in the Misty Divine murder mystery series. And in it, Misty, who is now running the drag bar that was left to her by her drag mother lady, she meets this private investigator and he is like, I've got to talk to you. And then he shows up the next day to talk to her at the bar, and he gets stabbed and shoved down the stairs. And he tells Misty that she has to find this guy and that's the mystery. So then she spends the entire book trying to find this guy, and she uncovers like a conspiracy, and it goes really cuckoo bananas. And I love the Misty Divine series. There's only two books, obviously, but it is so fun and so campy. It is like exactly what you want out of like a fun, campy murder mystery. I think that like Misty is such a fun detective. She's not a good detective by any means, but she is so fun and like bubbly and spunky, for lack of a better term. Like she's just such a fun detective to be following, and it's like a nice contrast from like gritty detective novels that people, are used to. Here is this 6 foot tall, bright pink wig, like model-esque drag queen who's solving this mystery. And it's so fun. It was a great mystery. I think that the stakes were there. You felt the stakes despite it being like fun and campy and like a good time. And I do also think that it is like a very nice like vision of the queer community and where the queer community could go, the power that it holds when you band together, that kind of thing. And like it's just so nice. The next book I gave 4.5 stars is Strange Pictures by Aketsu. And this one, it's like a series of short stories, and these pictures are central to the stories. And it kind of describes like multiple murders. Like all of them are connected to different murders, and all of the stories are still interconnected. I thought it was a really great time. It was so fun, so interesting. It was a very fast read. This one is a pretty short novel, and there's, a lot of pictures in it. So I read this one really fast, but I really enjoyed it. I am looking forward to reading more of Oketsu's work, so I think it's like Strange Buildings and Strange Houses, I think, are the other ones. But I really do want to pick up the other ones because this one was such a good time. Like the mystery was so interesting and it was just really fun. The next book I gave 4.5 stars to is The Bog Wife by Kay Chronister. And this one you follow a group of siblings whose father dies, but their family has this like weird ancient ritual with the bog that they take care of, where they when a patriarch dies, they have to bury his body in the bog, and then the next day the oldest son will go out and the bog will provide him with a wife, and then the wife will continue the bloodline, so on and so forth. However, the issue arises that when this all happens, they do the ritual as they should, but the bog does not provide a wife. And so then the siblings are kind of thrown into this turmoil where they don't know what to do. They don't know if the bog is going to survive, if they are going to survive, what to do, because this ritual has never been broken before. And I think it was such an interesting like perspective on sibling relationships, on familial relationships, familial duty, along with like how we treat nature and what we take from it and what we get back from nature. And I will say the like last couple lines of this book are such bangers. I read this for book club, and everyone at book club, just no matter what their opinion or their star rating of the book was, agreed that the last couple lines were so good that it was almost enough to like up the rating by at least another star. Like it was just so good. I'm not going to tell you what it is because you should experience it for yourself. But just know, highly recommend. Great book. The next book I rated 4.5 stars is These Familiar Walls by CJ Dotson. This one follows this family as they move back into her the wife's parents' house after they get brutally murdered. And there's just something going on in the house. There is something weird. They're like being haunted, but it's also a like dual timeline story where it is like the wife in the present day, but also the wife in her early teens. Like I think she's like 12, 13 in that timeline, and her connection to the neighbor who is kind of a psycho. And this neighbor is the one who like murdered her parents. So it is kind of like a full circle storytelling. I thought it was really interesting. It was kind of strange, and like I feel like I never fully trusted the narrator because the narrator is just the wife, and I never trusted her. There was always something like kind of weird about her. And it was like taking unreliable narrator to a different level, in my opinion. But it was a good level. Like I really enjoyed that. The next one I rated 4.5 stars is Morsel by Carter Keene. And this one you follow a girl and her dog as she goes out for her job. She works at like a real estate company. She goes out for her job to take pictures of this plot of land that they're going to be helping sell, like pro bono. But then while she's out there, she experiences the horrors. The horrors being like a freaky cult and a weird eldritch horror. And this one, this one is just a little over 200 pages. It is a fast read. I think I read it in like less than 3 hours because once again, it's only 200 pages and you just fly through it because it is action packed from the beginning to the end. And it is so good. Like activated like a fight or flight sense in me. Like I felt like a rabbit on the run. And it was so good. And like, I don't know how Carter Keene did it, but you get so attached to these characters that you only know for like maybe 5, 10 pages. And then something happens to them, and you're like genuinely upset because it's like, wait, I liked them. And it's kind of mind-blowing how fast Carter Keene writes a character that you get attached to and how well done and well created these characters are that you get attached to them that fast. I don't know. It's a great like character-centered story while also being like very plot forward. The next book I rated 4.5 stars is Whidbey by T. Kira Madden. So in Whidbey, you follow Birdie, Lindsay, and Mary Beth, and they're all connected to this man, Calvin. Calvin is Mary Beth's son, but he is also the man who sexually abused Birdie and Lindsay in their youth. He's like a convicted pedophile, and he gets murdered. The novel is told from their different point of views and how they handle this trauma from their past, at least Lindsay and Birdie's trauma from their past, how they're dealing with the modern day. And Mary Beth's point of view is really just focused on how she is grieving Calvin and his death. And it was such an interesting read. It's definitely been one that's been like sitting with me. Like I gave it 4.5 stars, but I still haven't been able to articulate like exactly what I liked and what I didn't like about the book. The next book I rated 4.5 stars is Out There Screaming. It is a short horror anthology that focuses on Black authors, and it is edited by Jordan Peele. This one I gave 4.5 stars because I really enjoyed most of the short stories in here. I did not enjoy two of them. They kind of dragged on and they weren't that interesting to me, and so I dropped it like a 0.25 every time I didn't enjoy one of the stories. And since there was only two, we're at 4.5. But overall, I really enjoyed this one. There are some really great short stories that I would love to see like fully fleshed out as actual novels because they were just so interesting. But highly recommend for anyone who's looking for like short story anthology, a horror book, anything like that. The next book I rated 4.5 stars is Where the Wildflowers Grow by Tara Shelton. In this one, you follow Lee as she escapes from prison on a like mad coincidence, but it's not really a coincidence because Lee has always been like the survivor of her family. And then she starts trying to piece her life back together and heal and grow from the trauma that she's experienced in the past. It is a beautifully written novel. The prose is amazing, and it is just so like lovely to see Lee learn to trust, learn to love, and like figure out who she is past all of the trauma and experiences she's had. Because I feel like at the beginning of the book, she is defined by her experiences, and by the end of the books, she is herself and she has had these experiences that helped her come to figure out who she is, but they are not all that she is. The next book I gave 4.5 stars to is Such Charming Liars by Karen M. McManus. In this one, you follow two characters, Kat and Liam, who knew each other for about 24 hours, like 10 years ago, when their parents, who are both like con men, they decided that it's a good idea to get married. And so they're siblings for about 24 hours. Flash forward, they're no longer married and they don't interact with each other. They see each other because they are both trying to con the same family. But in the process of the heist, something goes wrong, somebody dies, and now the kids are kind of at the center of this like crazy conspiracy murder story. This one I really enjoyed. I thought it was so fun despite being, a murder mystery. And the stakes were there. Like normally with like YA murder mysteries, I feel like the stakes get a little muddied because they're teenagers, they don't really understand what's happening to them or the danger that they're in, or the danger isn't as present as I think it should be. But in this one, they are so like aware of the danger and the danger is aware of them. And finally, the last book in the 4-star category is Blood Marked by Tracy Dion. It is the sequel to Legendborn, and the only reason it's in here, it's a 4.75. The only reason it's not a 5-star is because it just took, I think, a little too long to get into the meat and potatoes of the plot. Like the exposition was just a little too long, and that's not a bad thing. I think it really ended up helping in the long run. But as I was reading it, I was like, okay, I get it. Let's move on. All right, we are now in our final category, and that is my 5-star reads. So the first one I'll be talking about is That Which Feeds Us by Keala Kendall. In this one, you follow Lahua. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I'm sorry. As she goes to Hawaii to find her twin sister who has gone missing. And the last place she heard where her twin sister was this farm in Hawaii where you could work there for room and board and meals. So she goes there and she's trying to investigate what happened to her sister, but then she uncovers like really gruesome history of the place and like a cover up that's been happening. And it's just very, very freaky. This one is also super creepy, super horrifying. It's got a mystery that keeps you on the edge of your seat and action sequences that have your heart racing. I absolutely loved this book. I am so interested in anything Kiala Kendall has to write. The next book I rated 5 stars is The Caretaker by Marcus Cleaver. And this one I rated 5 stars because I read it on audiobook. I listened to the audio of it. When I tell you that the audiobook is actually the only way anyone should read this book, I truly mean it. I didn't even read like a digital or print version of it. I only listened to the audiobook, but the production is so immersive. It is so insanely good. Like there's it's oh, it sent genuine like shivers down my spine. I am looking over my shoulder. I am checking to make sure that I'm not going to get killed because the voice actors did the damn thing. It was so good. The next one that I gave 5 stars to is Killer on the Road by Stephen Graham Jones. And this one, you follow the main character as she gets into a fight with her mom and she decides that she is going to hitchhike and get out of the area. And then her friends are like, no, that's dangerous. We're not going to let you do that. And so then they all join each other for like a road trip. But unbeknownst to them, they're now being stalked by a serial killer who follows the road and is also kind of a hitchhiker. This one is so good. I think it is like horror thriller in every sense of the word. It is the pinnacle of horror thriller, really. And the body horror that Stephen Graham Jones can write is so good. It had me questioning if he'd ever actually eaten an eyeball, like a human eyeball, because there's no way he wrote that so viscerally graphic without him eating an eyeball. And if he has eaten an eyeball, you know what? That's his business. But I he had to because that was crazy. And I thought that the serial killer was so fun while also being horrifying and actually pretty scary. And I just loved all of the characters. So the next two I gave 5 stars are Legendborn and Oathbound. So that's the first and the third book in the Legendborn series. I've talked about them at length, but they are so good. I highly recommend to anyone who has ever enjoyed a book ever in their life because it you will enjoy this one. I can't imagine people don't like these books. Sorry. The next book I gave 5 stars to is Hijab Butch Blues by Lamia H. In this one, you follow a queer Muslim woman as she immigrates from her home country to America, but she's also coming to terms with her queerness and her identity. And like it also relates their experience with parts of the Quran. And I think that is just such an interesting concept, especially as like religion and queerness is something that is constantly talked about. Like I feel like it is always a topic of conversation while still being, like a very personal thing. I personally have not a lot of connection to religion. I was raised Catholic, as many are. And I just thought it was so interesting to read this novel from the perspective of someone who is so connected with their religion, but also so in touch with their queerness, and seeing their journey and how, they come to terms with it, how they express themselves, etc., etc. This I cannot recommend more. This is like instrumental, fundamental reading for anyone interested in like queer literature, queer memoirs, literally anything. It's so good. Next book I gave 5 stars to this year is also a nonfiction, and this one is Killing the Black Body by Dorothy Roberts. In this one, she discusses the policing of Black women's bodies, especially surrounding reproduction, and how historically this has happened, how it present day is happening, and implications for the future. I think that this is such an important read, especially once again, with the way reproduction rights are going in the United States, as well as just the rise of racism, misogyny, homophobia, etc., as it is happening in this country right now. It is another one of those nonfictions I think about on a pretty regular basis, especially in terms of how it applies to like modern day reproductive justice, because it talks about Planned Parenthood and how Planned Parenthood was created, and different forms of birth control and why they were created and how they were originally used to police Black women and their reproductive rights. It's a tough read, but it is definitely one that everyone should do, because it's a text that you should be engaging with. The next book I gave 5 stars to is Invisible Woman by Caroline Criado Perez. As I talked about earlier, I won't go too in depth about it, but 5 stars, I think about it every day. Next book I gave 5 stars is How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kwong. Once again, I talked about this earlier, so I'm going to breeze right past this, but I still highly recommend to anyone who enjoys a romance. Next book I read that I gave 5 stars is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. This one, you follow a character, I think his name is Aiden? Yes. You follow Aiden as he tries to uncover who killed Evelyn Hardcastle and get to the bottom of her death. But the catch is that every day he wakes up in the body of a different witness. And this is going to happen for 8 days. At the end of the 8th day, if he cannot figure out and deliver the correct answer to the death of Evelyn Hardcastle and who killed her, he starts all over again and he lives those days all over again. I thought this was such an interesting concept, and I think it was really well executed. I loved being in, like, you're always in Aiden's head, but he is in different bodies. And I kind of really enjoyed watching how that played out and seeing how just like a glimpse of this person's experience is fundamental to figuring out who killed Evelyn Hardcastle and what happened in this mystery. I thought it was a good mix of like murder mystery and magic, because there's magic in this. I mean, he's in a time loop. So but I thought it was like a great mix between the two, and I didn't have to like suspend my disbelief too much. I will say it probably could have been a little bit short. It comes in at about like 450 pages, and I do think that maybe like 50 of those pages at least could have probably been chopped off, because at certain points I did feel like we were kind of just waffling around. But I did still really enjoy it, and it's a great mystery. I highly recommend. The next book I rated 5 stars is The Viscount Who Loved Me by Julia Quinn. Once again, it is the second book in the Bridgerton series, and it follows Anthony and Kate. But since I talked about it at length earlier, I'm just gonna stop it there. If you like a Regency romance, you will like The Viscount Who Loved Me. And finally, we have reached the final book that I gave 5 stars to, which funnily enough was, I think, my first 5-star read of the year, and that is Gather Together in My Name by Maya Angelou. This is the continuation of I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, which is one of Maya Angelou's memoirs, and so it tells the story of her life. It is great. Maya Angelou has lived a life, and it is so interesting to read, and she writes it so beautifully. Like, her prose is so beautiful, and the way she tells a story is so immersive. It is amazing. I loved this one. I do want to continue reading this because I believe it's like a pretty good series of memoirs that she wrote. I think that this is like the second in a long line of memoirs about her life, so I'm really looking forward to picking up the rest of them, just because Maya Angelou has lived such a life that I can't imagine I wouldn't enjoy the rest of her memoirs, and I'm really looking forward to picking them up. All right, that is the end of this video. I talked about 46 books. I talked about the mid-year freakout tag. So much has happened, But thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed. If there's any books on here that you've read or you're thinking about reading, definitely let me know. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on them, totally feel free to leave a comment below or DM me on Instagram. I'm at kevs_library there as well. And I love talking to anyone and everyone about books. So if you have any suggestions for me that you think I might like that maybe you'll see in my end of year wrap up, definitely let me know. But thanks for watching. Smoochies. Mwah!